Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope and pray that you are fine wherever you are. Welcome again to this session of Kenya, Africa, and global issues. It is over 70 years, close to 70 years, since the first African country gained independence. And African countries, although claim to have gained independence, marking a liberation from colonialists, close to 70 years since then, Africa still grapples with the colonizers' chains. I believe, and from the developments that I see today, Africa is not yet independent. Our founding fathers foresaw an Africa that was free. They foresaw an Africa that was independent. They foresaw an Africa that was self-sustaining. And they foresaw African governments that were making decisions on their own. Founding fathers emphasized the need for Africa and African countries to detach themselves from the colonizers. They emphasized the need for African governments to make decisions on their own, and they emphasized the need for African governments to focus on developing their own people. Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana had a vision for his country, and he had a vision for Africa. Ahmed Sekou Toure had a vision for Guinea, and he also had a vision for Africa. Leopold Sedar Senghor focused on the liberation of Senegal and the liberation of the whole Africa. Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya focused on the liberation of Kenya and the liberation of the whole Africa. And many other founding fathers, they emphasized the need for Africa to be independent, the need for Africa to focus on Africa. I share the thoughts of other liberation strugglers, other liberation fighters, such as Nnamdi Azikiwe, such as Nelson Mandela, such as Samora Machel, Sankara, and many others. They envisioned an Africa that was free, an Africa that was detached from the yokes of colonialism. The Africa that I see today is an Africa that is under colonial domination, an Africa that is controlled by the same colonizers that our founding fathers fought against. Across many African countries, governments and leaders make decisions that fulfill the will and wishes of the colonizers. They make decisions that make the colonizers happy. And they make decisions according to the conditions that the colonizers put on the table. I have seen in several occasions across African countries that governments and presidents make decisions to impress the West or Europe. They make decisions with the Europeans, the West, the United States in their hearts. What did the founding fathers say? The founding fathers emphasized the need for African leaders, the need for African governments to make decisions with Africans in their hearts. They supported an independent institution that was focused on developing their own. Recently I read a statement about the the political developments and economic developments in my country, Kenya. And currently, as of today, there is a nationwide protest over the Punitive Finance Act 2023. This act, in my view, punishes Kenyans. This act imposes punitive taxes to ordinary Kenyans, ordinary citizens, ordinary Africans. But the US ambassador to Kenya, Meg Whitman, emphasized that this act, this law, would be beneficial for Americans. In her own words, the Finance Act 2023 would attract more billionaires, more American billionaires to Kenya. This is one of the issues that I am talking about in this session. The Kenyan government is forcing this Finance Act on innocent civilians to impress the United States. The United States emphasizes that this act, this law, would attract more investors into the country without considering the potential effect of this act on ordinary Kenyans. This is what I am talking about. Kenya is making decisions based on the wishes and the will of the West. Recently in Uganda, the Ugandan parliament, supported by the Ugandan president Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, passed a homosexuality act that criminalized homosexuality in the country. The United States was very swift to issue travel bans, travel restrictions to the state officials in the country. At this point, I am showing you that the United States demands that every decision that is made in an African country, the West demands that every decision that is made in an African country fulfills their wishes and wills. If Uganda, in quotes, as an independent state, independent country, made a law that is good for their people, the United States was bothered. This is the Africa I am talking about today. I am talking about an Africa that is still not free. An Africa that is still primarily reliant on the West. African governments and African countries rely on the West to restructure their governments. They rely on the West to restructure their economics, and they rely on the West to restructure their social institutions. When will Africa be free? That is a question that I am asking on this platform. When will Africa be free? Because from the evidences that we see today, we are in an Africa that is not yet free. We are in an Africa that is entangled in a non-mutual relationship with the West and Europe. You know, in Africa, when we identify the United States, we identify Europe as, we call them commonly as the West. Sorry. I ask Africans, and I ask African leaders, I ask African governments, when will Africa be free? When will we fulfill the dreams of our founding fathers? Our founding fathers foresaw an Africa, and they fought for the freedom of Africa. They fought for the liberation of Africa. They fought for an Africa that needed to be detached from Western influence. They fought, and some of them died. I would say, as it stands now, the founding fathers of Africa, the liberation fighters, fought in vain. They died in vain because while they were fighting for an Africa that was free, while they were fighting for an Africa that was independent, while they were fighting for an Africa that was detached from Western influence, the current leaders and the current governments have ignited a new phase of romance with the colonizers. Africans have been taken aback to the colonizers. And currently, Africa has not been colonized for slavery. Africa has been currently colonized for its resources and using loans. When will Africa be free? That is a question that I am asking my viewers. A question that I am asking Africans. When will Africa be free? Because from the undertakings, from the developments, from the establishments, Africa is yet to be free. African presidents, African governments still rely on the West to restructure their politics, to restructure their social status, to restructure their economics. Sorry for that. When will Africa be free? The founding fathers were very critical of Africa. They envisioned an Africa that was under regeneration. They desired the regeneration of Africa. And what we see today is an Africa that is headed towards ruins. I want to tell Africans, and I want to refer Africans to an address that was delivered by one of the key founding fathers of Africa. I want to refer to Isaka Seme's address titled The Regeneration of Africa, which was delivered in 1906. I want to refer to just an excerpt of this speech to tell Africans what Africa needs to do. I'm referring to Isaka Seme's 1906 address, and I will read the address. Isaka Seme said, and I quote, The African already recognizes his anomalous position and desires a change. The brighter day is rising upon Africa. Already I seem to see her chains dissolved, her desert plains red with harvest, her Abyssinia and her Zululand the seats of science and religion, reflecting the glory of the rising sun from the spires of their churches and universities, her Congo and her Gambia whitened with commerce, her crowded cities sending forth the hum of business, and all her sons employed in advancing the victories of peace, greater and more abiding than the spoils of war. That was Isaka Seme's desire for Africa, Isaka Seme's vision for Africa. Isaka Seme saw an Africa that was free of the colonial chains. He saw an Africa that was booming with harvests, food, Africa with no hunger, Africa with no malnutrition. Isaka Seme saw an Africa and he foresaw an Africa that was the seat of science and technology and religion. He foresaw an Africa that was benefiting its own people. I want to believe and I want to claim that many people will share with me this commitment, that the Africa that we see today is an Africa that is directly opposite from what Isaka Seme saw. Isaka Seme foresaw a prosperous Africa. He foresaw an advanced Africa. He foresaw an independent Africa. He foresaw a free Africa. And to him and many other founding fathers of Africa, they demanded an independent Africa, a liberated Africa, a regenerated Africa. The Africa I see today, and I pity my Africans, my fellow Africans, I pity them. We see an Africa that is sold to the West, an Africa that is relying exclusively on the West. We see an Africa that has gone back to the dark roots. I believe you will share with me the vision that Africa is not yet independent. Africa is still under colonial chains. What should we do as Africans? What should we do as Africans to fulfill the dreams of our founding fathers? What should we do as Africans to fulfill the dreams of Isaka Seme? What should we do as Africans to fulfill the dreams of Nelson Mandela? What should we do as Africans to fulfill the dreams of the likes of Thomas Sankara? Africa needs change, and this change comes when Africa focuses on Africa. This change comes when Africa engages in a mutual relationship with the West. Currently, the relationship between Africa and the West is non-mutual. That is, only the West benefits from this interaction. I believe and I argue that Africa is yet to be independent. We claim to be independent. We claim to be sovereign. We claim to be free, but we are never free. We are yet to be independent. We are yet to be free. Africa needs change, and this change will only come if Africa focuses on Africa. Thank you.